a resolution to declare April the 24th through the 30th, 2017 as Black April Memorial Week in the state of Michigan.
Members, if I may have your attention, we have a colleague wishing to address us on the question before the House. The chair recognizes Representative Howrylak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I speak on behalf of House Resolution 73. We've been doing this every year that I've been in the legislature, and I appreciate the support of the Michigan House of Representatives. On April 30, 1975 is when South Vietnam fell to the communist forces in the north. And most of us have been blessed by the gift of freedom. Most of us in this room were...
Members, if I may have your attention, the chair recognizes Representative Howrylak.
Most of us were born and raised in the United States in a country of freedom. Freedom of religion, freedom of thought, freedom of speech. Freedom, it's such a beautiful word. Let us not take it for granted. To emphasize this, let me tell you a story, or rather give you an example. On April 30th, 2010, the night before my wedding, I sat down with my now brothers-in-law, my now father-in-law, and my own father for dinner. As we settled in, there was a break in the conversation, and my father-in-law started to speak, and he looked very serious. This was a story he had never ever told his own sons, let alone his future son-in-law, me. In fact, my now wife didn't even know this. On April 30th, 1975, after South Vietnam fell, my father-in-law, who was a judge in the Vinh Long province of South Vietnam, was captured by the communists. The Viet Cong had less than satisfactory feelings for members of the Vietnamese government in the South. He had two guns that were pointed in his head, and they did basically a mock execution, if you will, and then they proceeded to put him in an internment camp. Now, the communists were never really good at administration, and this became a blessing in disguise of sorts because they accidentally released my father-in-law after about a year. Now, my father-in-law, being a good man, didn't lose that opportunity because this was an opportunity for him to protect and to save his family. Because after the fall of Saigon, there was chaos all over the South. After a few aborted attempts to leave the country, my father-in-law and my now wife, who was an infant at the time, and her older brother, and my mother, who, by the way, can't swim, got into an overcrowded fishing boat and started bobbing up and down on the South China Sea. Pirates really liked South Vietnamese refugees because they could take advantage of them. In fact, a few 100,000 South Vietnamese perished on the South China Sea. My parents-in-law considered themselves lucky because they only lost all of their possessions, the ones that they had left. And my mother-in-law refers to them as the good pirates because they actually gave them some fish. They eventually made it to a Malaysian refugee camp, and after a few months were able to be settled in Australia. But as traumatic as this story was, it's far from unique. There's a story of the old family friend of the Trungs who lost his wife when she was taken by the pirates, and he's still looking for her to this day. Or the second cousin who was a police officer in Vietnam and had to spend 17 years in an internment camp. Or General Lê Minh Dao, the hero of the Battle of Xuan Loc, whose troops, though surrounded on all sides by the North Vietnamese, fearlessly held their ground in the waning days of April 1975. He also spent 17 years in an internment camp. If you go up to the gallery, each and every person up there has their own story. It's a story of millions of people of South Vietnam. Or the refugees who were without a country, who were in limbo as recently as last year, in fact, who have been recently settled in Canada. You see, our American troops are fighting in Vietnam for freedom. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise, because it would be a lie. And it would be wrong. Our men and women of the United States Armed Forces stood fast and strong against the forces of tyranny and oppression. They were defending the human rights of tens of millions of Vietnamese. It's why the Stars and the Stripes is so emotional to our countrymen and their children who sought a new home in the land of the free and the home of the brave. They sought a new home here in America. The Vietnamese Americans in Michigan really appreciate the Michigan House of Representatives for standing by the principles that this nation was founded upon, to honor the sacrifices of American soldiers who fought to defend the freedom and liberty for South Vietnam before 1975. Please join me in supporting House Resolution 73, a resolution that memorializes the fall of South Vietnam in April of 1975, the fall of a free Vietnam, and also a resolution that honors the sacrifices made by the men and women of the United States Armed Forces who served our country and all of the people of this world defending freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.